The hull sighs as it lifts, then settles, and you breathe with it, slow and even, while a lantern swings in a soft arc over damp planks. Rope murmurs against wood. The night air tastes of salt and resin, and somewhere a ladle taps a rim, then rests. You feel the ship's long body cradle you, the ocean steady and deep. Will follow that hush from open water to a small, waking colony. A quiet promise rides with you. Food laid by, hands learning rhythm, storms passing. As gray dawn spreads across the Atlantic, we turn toward land, and the day begins. You arrive at the quay before the sun fully knows the water. The air is still, cool on your cheeks, and the cobbles hold last night's damp. Around you, bundles are tied and retied, knots checked with the same small tug. A loaf wrapped in cloth changes hands, a final piece of bread from a neighbor who smiles and looks away so the eyes don't fill. Bells in the harbor speak in low tones, a measured farewell that belongs to nobody and to everyone. You keep one hand on the railing and the other on a small satchel with its careful weight. A knife wrapped in linen, a folded shirt, a threadbare book, a few seeds in a twist of parchment. The ship waits with patient ribs, tar sweet on the morning air, pine and hemp braided with the smell of salt. Men move slowly to spare their backs, easing casks into place. Children hold arms like branches in a breeze, not sure where to settle, then tuck themselves close when the gangplank creaks. Boarding has a quiet order. You step into a narrow passage, counting steps without thinking, learning the measure between beam and beam. A berth is chosen because it feels sheltered from a draft, because the lantern light touches it gently, because water stowed just beyond will be close enough. You learn where the cups hang, which barrel holds fresh water, which holds salted fish. A corner is set aside for reading and for silence. A hand smooths the space as if spreading a cloth. The reason for this leaving doesn't need many words. Some go for land they can tend without a landlord's knock. Some follow a faith held softly but firmly, like a warm stone in the pocket. Some want steadier work, simple work, hands on wood and soil, a slower pace that lets a family breathe together. You don't argue with the reasons. You let them sit beside you like kind company. The ship lifts under you, not a sudden motion but a slow invitation. Lines are loosed and coiled with care. Faces linger along the quay. Hands raise and lower, then become shapes, then become the suggestion of faces, and then only the sense of being seen. The harbor narrows, then opens, the water deepening in color until the green turns slate, and gulls cry and wheel, then fade to quiet dots that glide behind. At sea, the day breaks into small, steady pieces. Bread is rationed and softened in a cup, the crust yielding patiently to warm water. A thin soup warms the hands and the chest, and the spoon's soft click against wood becomes a friendly sound. The air above deck is where you go to stretch and fill your lungs. You take turns because space is a kindness that must be shared, and the path along the rail becomes a measured walk that maps a new home for your feet. The details settle like clean straw in a stall. You learn the feel of rope, rough on the palm, then smoother as your skin agrees to it. The sail above gives a long sigh when the wind eases, then fills again, a deep breath that makes you breathe with it. The mast speaks in low knocks when the swell changes, not loud but present, like a grandfather clearing his throat. The air carries tar and pine, and the lightest thread of smoke from a safe, careful flame. When you close your eyes, you can still see the slow swing of the lantern. Reading happens in soft patches, a psalm voiced without urgency, words that fall into the ship's rhythm and ride there. Someone mends a linen cuff, the needle finding its path, then pausing when the ship leans, then starting again. A hand checks the water cask by weight, not by measurement, feeling the day's change with the wrist. Another stirs a pot until the simmer evens and settles, and then leaves the spoon resting where it won't wander. Food has its tempo. Hardtack meets the cup. Dried peas become a small comfort when they swell and soften. Once, a rare apple is cut into thin, generous slices, 8 shares from one fruit, each piece offered with a small joke that keeps it from feeling too dear. Crumbs are not waste. They wait for evening, folded into a bit of broth, becoming a quiet second meal you can count on. Weather visits like a polite guest. A hushed drizzle writes its soft script on the deck, and you listen rather than watch. Then the clouds part in clean intervals, bright lanes of light moving over the water as if sweeping the surface. When the wind drops, canvas loosens its shoulders, then lifts again as the air returns. Nothing hurries, and you're grateful for that. One child counts knots in the overhead beam, finger tapping each one, then pausing when the ship leans so the counting can begin again. A parent hums a plain tune that knows the boat's slow sway, a tune built from notes that don't argue with sleep. Between them, a nap arrives like a patient friend who never knocks, just opens the door and steps in. You learn small skills because the day opens space for them. A simple knot that won't slip under a load. A stitch that binds a seam without puckering. The first easy stars that mark east and west when the horizon is a circle and nothing else speaks. The candle is guarded with cupped hands, its use careful, the flame a companion more than a tool. Cooperation becomes the fabric of the hours. Cups are shared and rinsed and returned. Stories travel the length of the deck, traded in short, steady lines that don't ask much and give enough. A game with pebbles moves across a plank. Pieces slide, and laughter rolls as gently as the water beneath. Fog lifts one late afternoon, the boundary between sea and sky sharpening like a well-honed edge, and the water ahead shows a slightly different shade, a whisper of change. Landbirds appear at dusk, little wings flicking low, and on the wind there's a faint sweetness that doesn't belong to open water. You don't name it. You simply breathe, and the journey settles into a calm, repeating pace that will carry you to shore. Morning gathers without rush, and you rise when the deck's small sounds say it's time. A broom passes in calm strokes, bristles whispering along damp boards, clearing crumbs, drying dew, setting the path for the day. You move with others in an easy line, hands finding familiar tools, voices low, each chore starting and ending like a soft ripple that meets another and blends. You check the linen you washed at dusk. It hangs from a line in the faint breeze, edges lifting and settling. A loose thread is trimmed, a seam is coaxed flat, and the cloth goes back to its place in the chest, clean and smelling of salt and sun. Mending asks for stillness, so the ship gives you a steady corner and a measured breath, and the needle glides, pauses, and glides again. A psalm is read without calling attention to itself, words shared the way bread is shared, passed down the bench with care. The phrases have the rhythm of waves, repeating, returning, reminding the heart to ease its hold. You don't need to speak to join. It's enough to listen and let the cadence settle into your chest. Water is checked by lift, not by guess. The cask leans into your hands, and you feel the day's draw. The promise of tomorrow still firm in its weight. If the bung needs tightening, a gentle tap is enough. The cup you use is plain and smooth, and when you drink, you take exactly what you need, no more, trusting the simple fairness that holds everyone steady. The pot is stirred with slow circles, wooden spoon tracing the same path until the simmer steadies. If peas are in the broth, you wait for the moment they yield, not to softness, but to comfort. If hardtack needs softening, a bit of steam and patience make it kinder. The scent is small but pleasing. Warm grain, broth touched with salt, a hint of smoke from the safe, watched flame. Between tasks, hands meet new skills. A length of cord becomes a lesson. You learn the knot that holds when pulled and loosens when asked. The rope has a voice, rough at first, then almost friendly as your palms learn to agree with it. A scrap of canvas takes a stitch. Your needle finds its path through thick weave, and you feel the fabric's quiet strength gather under your touch. The weather keeps company in long, polite visits. A bright interval opens across the sea, a path of light that moves slowly, inviting your eyes to follow, then pass on. Then a fine drizzle returns and writes on the deck, tiny commas that form and smudge and vanish. Canvas responds with a sigh no one needs to answer, and the mast gives a low, contented murmur that says the ship is listening and will mind the wind. You move in a gentle circuit with others, a shared pattern that needs no call. One rinses cups, another stacks them. A third wipes and sets them by their pegs. A story floats along the rail, a small tale from a village lane where a gate always creaked in the same spot. You smile at the sound you can almost hear. A child rolls 2 pebbles in their palm, then sets them on a plank and slides them back and forth, inventing a game that keeps hands busy and thoughts quiet. Once, a cup warms cold fingers long after it's empty. The heat lingers in the wood, a memory of broth that comforts more than the last sip did. A laugh follows it down the bench, soft as a shawl being shaken out and draped over shoulders. Then the ship leans, and the game pieces pause, and you all wait a breath for balance to return. Which it does, like a friend finding a seat next to you and settling in. Candles are trimmed with care. Wicks are pinched to a neat length, so flames won't smoke the beams. You learn how a cupped hand turns a draft, how a small plate under the base saves precious tallow from running. Light is not taken for granted. It's a guest you invite at the right time, then thank when it goes. When the air is clear, you lift your gaze. The sky keeps simple signs. You practice the first step. Find the line where sea gives way to air and hold it steady in your mind. If stars are there, you mark the ones that guide, not naming them all at once, just letting a few become familiar. Direction arrives not as a miracle, but as a calm habit of paying attention. Meals are brief, and they anchor the hours. Crumbs saved at noon become evening comfort, turned into a small porridge that eases the body into rest. The pot is scraped, not to waste, but to honor the work that filled it. You eat slowly, and you notice when you're satisfied, and you leave the rest for another. By late day, your hands smell of hemp and clean cloth, and your sleeves carry a trace of steam. The deck dries in neat patches. A gull rides the wind near the wake and then drifts away. The ship's long breath becomes your own. You feel the day stretch and settle into itself, every small task finished without hurry, every tool returned to its home, every voice quieting because the light is doing the same. At dusk, a soft sweetness threads the air, the kind that says land is thinking about you, even if it still waits beyond sight. A few small birds flicker above the waves, a reminder that branches aren't so far now. You let that knowledge rest, not a spark to excite, but a gentle warmth, like a hand over yours. Night will come, and your tasks will sleep, and tomorrow will bring the same patient rhythm, ready to hold you all the way to shore. The coast appears first as a change in light, a pale seam where the ocean loosens its hold and another color waits. Shallows glow green beneath the boat, and dunes lie ahead like low, resting backs, their curves brushed by the wind. Pines stand at a measured distance, dark and still, and the breeze carries a cool, faint resin that feels new and familiar at once. Voices fall quiet without being told. Even the oars dip more softly, as if the water here asks for care. You move into the small boat with slow feet and a steady hand on the gunwale. The ship's larger breath stays behind you, a comfort that will be memory by sundown. Oars take their rhythm from the tide, and the boat glides through water that shifts from slate to glass. Sand shows itself in patches, ripples drawn like small, even rows. You feel the bottom change in the oar's pull. The blade touches grit and lifts, and everyone leans forward for the last strokes. Feet meet sand with a quiet thud that seems louder than it is. The world widens in the space between the last wave's hiss and the next. You stand and let your weight settle, knees adjusting to ground that doesn't move. The silence isn't empty. It holds the far call of a bird, the hum of insects in the grasses, the whisper of onshore breeze through needles. A child presses a palm to the damp sand and smiles at the print it keeps. You draw the boat up above the wash and set a line around a drifted log. Bundles come ashore the way they left home. Carefully wrapped, knots checked with that same small tug. Water barrels roll only as far as they must, then sit with their flat ends kissed by sand. Tools come next. A hoe, a narrow spade, a small axe, each with its own balance in the hand. A pot with a soot-darkened belly is lifted like a sleeping cat, tucked into a safe pocket near the dunes. The first camp grows in simple circles. A ring of stones gathers itself from the shore, warm to the touch from the sun, and a small fire begins where the wind won't crowd it. Sparks climb and fade like thoughts that rise and drift away. You fetch water from a creek that writes a narrow line through low grass. Its sound is quick and patient at once, and when you dip the bucket, the surface mends itself cleanly. A ladle taps the rim and then rests, the same friendly note you learned at sea. Food arrives in the shape of a simmer. The pot hangs from a green forked branch set firm in sand, and the first steam rises with a comfort that makes shoulders lower. Bread saved for this moment softens in broth, and herbs from someone's pocket open their scent like a polite greeting. You eat with attention, not because there is little, but because the day asks for gratitude in small, steady ways. Work lays itself out without announcement. A few pace the edge of the trees, eyes on the ground for ant trails, for moss, for the way the land drains after rain. Others walk the beach and mark where the tide leaves its last line. A simple map takes shape in the mind. Here for shelter, there for water, there for wood. A hand lifts a handful of soil and rubs it to learn its grain. You nod to one another as if words have already been spoken. Inventory is a gentle counting. You note who holds seed. A twist of maize kernels, beans smooth as river stones, squash flat and mottled, each a promise kept in a small form. You note who carries heavier iron, a draw knife, a narrow adze, a handful of nails wrapped in cloth. Someone reads a line from a worn book, not for doctrine, but for calm. Another keeps the first watch at the tree line, eyes soft, posture easy, attention like a lantern with its wick turned low and steady. You remind yourself that cabins will follow shelters, fields will follow paths, and patience is the first crop to sow. A lean-to rises with 3 poles and a skin, then another with brush cut and propped, the wind braided out of the sleeping corner. Bedding spreads to air in the gentler sun. A rope strung between 2 stakes holds damp cloth that will dry while shadows lengthen. Small moments stitch the afternoon. A spoon clicks a quiet beat against a wooden bowl, then pauses as if listening for an answer. Someone hums a tune that belonged to a kitchen far away, and now belongs to this open shore. A wren, busy and small, flips through the reeds with quick precision, as if checking each stem for its name. The creek's water brightens a tin cup, and the cup returns the favor with a soft ring against stone. You keep tools where hands will find them again. Axe heads oiled and set under cover, knife blades wrapped, cord coiled with its end tucked through so it won't wander. Footprints gather near the water, then blur as the tide inches in. Paths already begin to show themselves where feet naturally choose to go. When you walk those lines, they feel right, the way a page invites a line of ink to follow its own grain. Evening doesn't fall. It arrives on level feet. Smoke climbs and lifts straight before it thins, a sign the air is settled. The light comes from a kinder angle, turning dune's grass to a soft, even gold. Voices ease lower, and the fire takes over the work of warmth and company. You lay a small branch on the coals and hear the soft pop as sap yields. Before rest, you look back toward the ship and then to the darkening trees. The sea and the shore stand as 2 patient elders, both willing to hold you if you respect their rules. You feel the colony begin to breathe, not as a town yet, but as a shared promise. The next breath will place a post. The next will lift a beam. For now, you let the fire speak, and you let the night gather its quiet, and you lie down knowing that morning will find the tools set out and hands ready to begin. Morning meets the clearing with a pale, even light, and you walk the chosen ground with calm feet. High and dry, with water near enough for a bucket's easy carry and the sun reaching it early. This place answers each quiet need. You pace the corners with a cord and a simple stake, marking a rectangle that feels right in the body, not just the eye. Grass bends and stays, a soft line that will soon be beam and wall. Tools come forward like friends called by name. The axe rests in your palm with a familiar weight. The adze waits for its turn. The saw's teeth shine in a narrow smile. A hand passes a whetstone, slow circles along each edge until the metal whispers. You test with a thumb, and then set the stone away, wrapped to keep grit from blunting tomorrow. The timber work begins with a measured breath. A sapling bows when you touch it, and you let it spring back, choosing thicker trunks that grew slow and straight. The first swing isn't hard, it's true. Chips turn in the air, pale and damp, and the smell of green wood opens around you, clean and steady. You trade places often, not from hurry, but from care, keeping strength for the next step. Felled trees rest in a respectful row. Limbs come away with tidy cuts, stacked for kindling and for pegs. Bark peels in strips where it will, and you leave the rest, knowing a little roughness keeps the weather honest. Hauling becomes a low, shared rhythm. 2 at the ends, 1 guiding the middle, feet finding balance together over roots and stones. The ground accepts the weight with a muffled thud that sounds like agreement. Framing is a quiet conversation between wood and hand. Sills are set on flat stones that have been leveled and turned, presenting their best faces upward. Corners meet with notches you've marked by eye and checked by feel, the fit encouraged by a wooden mallet whose thud lands like a heartbeat at rest. Pegs are tapped home, not forced, a gentle insistence that persuades the grain without bruising it. As walls rise, moss is pressed into seams, cool and springy, then tucked firm with a small stick. Where the gap asks for more, a sliver of wood is introduced and petted into place. Shingles begin from split rounds, the froe guided with a calm wrist, each shake separated and laid in a neat fan to season in the thin sun. Later, they'll climb the roof in overlapping lines that shed rain like a duck's back, simple and sure. Inside, you shape a hearth with stones that ring with different tones when struck. The flattest lie at the base, the ones that hold heat sit near the center. A thin bed of sand takes the strain and spreads it kindly. A shelf is set on pegs where hands will reach without looking, and a rope bed is strung with even tension, each knot snug and agreeing with the next. A peg near the door keeps a lantern at a safe, respectful distance from cloth and beam. Work pairs itself without being told. One cooks while two lift, a pot hanging from a green stick that won't burn through before the noon meal is done. A child gathers chips and arranges them by size, proud of order that matters. A neighbor watches the younger ones and reads a few lines out loud, the voice low and steady, smoothing the edges of the hours. The sound doesn't slow the hands, it helps them keep time. Between tasks, the land offers its small notes. A sapling bends and springs back when brushed by a passing shoulder, quick to forgive. The breeze shifts and brings the clean scent of river water, then turns and brings resin, then settles to nothing for a stretch that feels like grace. A blue scrap of sky shows between branches, and you let your eyes rest there for a breath before the next beam. By mid-afternoon, a roof frame throws its first shade, and the room darkens in a way that comforts. Sun finds the gaps and paints narrow ladders on the packed earth. Shingles begin their climb along the rafters, hands passing them up in an easy line, each one seated with a tap that marks progress more clearly than any spoken count. When a cloud moves, the light softens, and you hear the thin rasp of a saw settle into a slower tempo. Food returns you to center. A bowl of thickened broth, a heel of bread warmed on a flat stone, a handful of berries found along the creek. Each taste marks the day's middle and sets you gently back to work. You drink water that's been dipped and settled, clear and cool, and you thank it without words. As the sun inclines, the door frame stands true, a simple opening that reads as welcome even before a latch is cut. A small window, just large enough to borrow light, gains its crossbar. The floor is swept with a branch broom, and the dust rises and falls like a sigh. Someone runs a hand along the sill and smiles at the smoothness won with patient strokes. When the last peg of the day is set, you step back. The shelter holds a warm, even quiet. It isn't finished, but it's faithful. Shadows pool where the hearth will glow. The roof's first course sheds a test handful of water with a soft patter that sounds like approval. You hang the mallet by its cord, coil the rope with its end tucked through, and walk out into evening with shoulders low and easy. You stand at the threshold and let your eyes adjust. The clearing has changed by inches and by heart. The line of tools leans in tidy rest. The path between fire and door is already worn to a lighter shade. Voices move toward softer tones. You close the day the way you opened it, in measured steps, in shared work, in a calm that lingers after hands are empty. Morning opens with cool breath along the furrows, and you step into the new field where grass once stood and now rows wait in quiet promise. The soil turns in modest curls as the hoe finds its rhythm, and stones rise, patient and small, to be lifted and set along the edge like a border made of steady decisions. You work with measured strokes, pausing now and then to let your back lengthen and your breath slow. Seeds rest in a cloth pouch at your waist, the weight hardly there but important all the same. You press corn into marked mounds, 3 kernels in a small triangle, the earth folded back with the same gentle motion every time. Beans wait for their turn, to climb the corn later and lace the stalks with a soft green ladder, and squash seeds, flat and speckled, claim a wider circle where their vines can wander and shade the soil. Near the door, a smaller bed welcomes kitchen herbs. Thyme with its clean scent, sage with its quiet comfort, a narrow row of parsley for brightness. The land answers to patience. After a light rain, the ground holds a damp cool, and your boots feel the gov. When sun returns, you use the early hours and the evening edge, leaving the noon for shade and small mending. The day arranges itself around that kindness. Plant when the air is fresh, repair when shadows lengthen, carry water in steady trips that don't ask too much of your arms. Water begins as a rule you keep with care. The spring sits a short walk away, the path already smoother under your feet, and you bring clean buckets, lids set tight to keep dust and small leaves out. At the spring's lip, you dip without stirring the bottom, and you let the bucket float a breath before lifting so the water comes clear. Back at the hearth, a kettle rests where the heat is gentle, always warm, never empty, steam threading into the rafters with a soft, even line. Foraging folds into the afternoons. You move through thickets where berry canes arch and nod, where careful fingers find dark fruit that yields without bruising. The bowl fills with quiet tapping sounds, a steady rhythm broken by the soft, stained wipe of a palm against cloth. Down at the rocks, when the tide is right, mussels cling in clusters, and you ease them free, choosing the ones that feel firm and closing the rest back with respect for the next day. Along the forest edge, nuts lie tucked in leaf pockets, and a stick taps fallen limbs to see which hold hidden weight. You pay attention to small signs. The way the wren flicks through rails near the new fence tells you insects are there, and the soil, crumbly and dark where the shovel turned it, promises that roots will find their paths. The creek runs easy now, and its voice changes when rain has visited upstream, a little fuller, a little quicker. You learn its tones the way you learned the mast's low speech at sea. Work holds a tempo that lets the mind rest. After planting, you loosen a hinge that scraped at the door, shave a thin curl from its edge, and set it back so it moves like a breath. You tighten a peg that settled under the roof's first rains. You twist cord for a new line to dry cloth, fingers rolling fibers together until they agree and hold. Each small repair marks the hours like beads, a strand laid across the day. Food follows the season's early grace. Greens come first, tender leaves pinched from the edges of a patch that won't miss them. A handful of chives clipped close to the base wakes a simple pot with mild heat. Mussels open in the kettle with a friendly sigh, and you grate a bit of dried apple into porridge so the spoon brings a memory of sweetness to the lips. Bread cooled on a board, at noon carries a thin crackle when your knife meets it. You spread a touch of fat saved from supper, and feel your shoulders ease. Neighbors meet at the edges of fields without plan. You trade a handful of bean seed for a cutting of mint, and you promise to share squash when vines run well. A fence line is set with posts paced in even steps, rails lifted in pairs, the work lightened by talk that doesn't press. A simple gate swings true with a leather hinge, and a child slips through and then back again to test the fit. Laughter low, content like water over a shallow stone. Heat grows in the height of day, and you step into shade to sort the gathered herbs. Leaves lay on a cloth in a clean pattern, not overlapping so air can pass, and stems are tied in small bundles to hang from a beam where smoke won't bother them. The room fills with a mixed, calm scent, green and soft and a little sweet. You mark the bundles with a bit of thread so you'll remember which is which when summer deepens. In the evening, geese pass overhead, long lines writing the sky with slow, certain strokes. Their voices fall like measured notes, and you pause with the bucket halfway to the door to listen. The garden drinks a last cup, the earth giving back a faint, grateful smell. You check each row with your eyes and then with your hand, feeling where the soil has crusted and where it remains open. Inside, the kettle murmurs, a constant that steadies the room. You dip the ladle and hear its gentle echo against the rim, a sound that belongs to this house now. Hands wash in a shallow bowl, and the water clouds and settles, and you pour it into the herb bed where it won't be wasted. A lamp wick is trimmed, a book closes with a small breath, and bread on the board cools fully before it's wrapped. By night, the colony folds into a regular cadence, lights blooming and softening along the lane, then going dark one by one. The day's tools lean in their places, wood still warm from hands, metal clean and lightly oiled. You lie down, the scent of thyme and wood smoke near, and you let your mind drift across the planted mounds, the marked rows, the drying herbs, the steady spring. The work will wait, and it will welcome you again, and that knowing lets your body settle into rest. Morning comes with a different rhythm on trading day, a quiet stir that rises from many doors at once. You step onto the lane with a small basket tucked in your elbow, eggs cushioned in straw, a twist of dried herbs, a loaf with a good crust, and your feet find the path that leads toward the square near the shore. The air holds the mild scent of tidal mud and wood smoke, and somewhere ahead a low bell tolls, not urgent, simply marking time. Stalls are nothing more than boards on barrels, but they feel like home. A fisher lays out bright scales and clean lines, moving with the steady care of someone who has mended nets all winter. Beside him, a sack of flour rests with its mouth tied neat, and a small tin of nails sits weighty and sure. Wool hangs in soft twists, spun fine, and a smile trades for news while hands weigh a skein, feeling its promise of warmth. You move along the shore edge and hear boats rub lightly at their moorings, lines creaking in a friendly way. The cooper's hammer sounds in a true ring, iron against iron, then wood settling into hoops with a stout, contented sigh. You pause because the rhythm steadies you. Each tap corrects the last. Each step closes a gap you can't see but can hear. Across the open, a potter turns a wheel with measured pressure. Clay climbs and narrows beneath wet fingers, walls rising even and calm. A weaver's shuttle passes back and forth, thread kissing thread, the soft brush of fiber like a breath on a cheek. Trade here is simple and fair, and you feel it in your shoulders. Fish for flour, a fleece for nails, eggs for a small pot mended at the rim. A child holds a tiny bundle of mint, proud of a first swap, and an older neighbor slips a small extra sprig into the hand with a wink that says, "Try it in your tea tonight." Words travel in low tones. A calf born strong, the road widened by carts taking the same line day after day, the bridge plank that needs replacing before autumn storms remember it. You pass the meeting house, its benches smoothed by many steady Saturdays, and you step inside for a moment to breathe the quiet. The air is cooler here, held by thick walls and still floorboards. Sunday will bring a wide hush, voices softened to almost nothing, a hymn that moves without straining, a long inhale for the town, letting the week settle. In one corner, a small school space waits, slates stacked, chalk wrapped in cloth, a primer with a frayed edge. Letters here are learned in patient strokes, names practiced until they carry ease. Outside again, a handful of men and women gather with shouldered staves for a brief, calm drill. Movements are tidy and spare, more about standing together than about show. It ends short, and the staves return to pegs, and the square breathes out as if relieved to slide back into work. A cart rolls by with a modest tax in kind. Grain, measured in a small bin, shared for the road and the bridge and the bell's good maintenance. Offered without fuss, received without weight. Neighborly help knots the day together. You cross to a house where a roof frame gleams new, and a dozen hands lift shingles in a smooth exchange, each piece rising, settling, tapped, and passed. Laughter rolls like low surf, folding in and out without pressing. At the fence line beyond, rails lean where winter shrugged too hard. 3 sets of hands make short work of the tilt, posts reset and tamped, top rails dropped into pockets that fit like memory. Someone hands you seed wrapped in a twist, beans with a good climb, saved from last year's best hill, and you tuck them away with the care you gave the first kernels you planted. A bell tolls once, deep and low, and the square pauses, not to gather, but to listen and go on, reminded that you share this time and this place. A book closes in the school corner, pages whispering together. A slate wipes clean with a sigh of damp cloth. You feel the town breathe like a tide, coming in with the gathering, going out with the dispersing, steady, sure, and gentle on the edges. As dusk leans in, doorways glow in a warm scatter. Steps soften, and the sounds of making turn toward home tasks. A hand mill's soft grind, a knife's careful rasp on a stick, a whisper of broom across a threshold. You walk back with your basket lighter and your mind full of small exchanges that feel like anchors. The lane is familiar underfoot, the ruts friendly, the dust settled by a late sprinkle. When you pass the meeting house again, its windows hold the last thin band of light, then let it go without fuss. Inside your own door, you set nails by their measure, coil cord with its end tucked, and lay mint on the sill to dry. The day's last work is quiet and close, a wick trimmed, a bowl rinsed and turned, a hinge checked for ease. Outside, voices fade yard by yard, and the sea's low breath finds you between houses, a gentle thrum that says it's there if you need it. You feel the colony's pulse ease into evening. Market stilled, tools stacked, benches empty, paths cooling under a soft sky. It's enough. You let the lamp's small circle hold you, and you rest inside the gentle heart you helped make. Cold settles like a soft blanket over the roofs, and you meet it with order you've been building all year. Bins hold corn in dull gold rows, kernels dry and steady. Dried apples hang in gentle garlands, thin moons that catch the low light. Barrels line the wall, salted fish stacked firm, lids chalked with neat marks. Quiet promises you can touch with the back of your hand and trust. The hearth becomes the day's calm center. Coals are banked at night beneath a careful hill of ash, a slow heart that wakes with the smallest breath. Wood is sorted by size, twigs for quick kindness, splits for steady heat, lengths for the long middle hours. A kettle takes its place and murmurs from first light to last, steam rising in a narrow ribbon that writes patience into the rafters. Inside, work gathers in tidy circles. A shirt's frayed cuff learns a new line of stitches, each one even and resigned. A spoon takes shape under a small knife, curls of pale wood falling like thin snow onto the board. A spindle hums in a low, contented tone as fiber twists to yarn, hands steady, foot quiet, time measured in soft turns rather than clocks. Letters come out in the slowest season, chalk on slate, straight lines practiced until they feel like breathing. Outside, winter's gentleness shows in how it softens sound. Snow lays a hush over the lane. Your boots press a clean print that fills with blue shadow. Paths are brushed with a broom, not scraped, and roofs are tapped free with a stick, easy and regular, so weight never surprises the beams. The creek narrows to a moving thread, and you listen to its thin voice the way you once listened to rigging in a light wind. A mitten dries on a line above the hearth, steaming first, then warming until the wool turns springy again. A page turns with a hollow whisper, and the book rests open near the lamp while you set another log, the flame brightening, then settling back to its small, faithful glow. A cat finds the warmest circle on the floor and kneads, then curls, then sleeps, a rhythm as dependable as the kettle's breath. Storage is kept like a gentle ledger. You lift a lid, take what the day asks for, and notch the chalk in a small square. Fish for Friday, apples for Sunday porridge, corn measured for a week. The room answers with a feeling of enough, not abundance that blares, but sufficiency that soothes. When a barrel's brine needs a handful of salt or a seal wants tightening, the fix is quiet and soon. Stories come forward when the dark lingers. You sit close, shells of the day shed, and voices trade scenes as if passing a ladle. The storm you watched from behind a shutter. The fox that learned the fence's pattern. The first morning when the kettle sang without prompting. You don't push the tales, you let them amble, letting pauses hold as much as words. A hymn thread slips in, unannounced, and you follow it a verse or two, then let it go. Wind sometimes speaks at the corners, but the latch holds and the boards answer with calm. You check the banked coals, turn them once with the iron, and lay a small stick to bridge ember to flame. In that soft lift of heat, you feel the circle of the year close and open at once. Voyage folded into village, green season sleeping under white, tomorrow's work resting in storage and skill. You pour night water into the basin, cool and clear, and set it where morning hands will find it. The lamp wick is trimmed, the room eases darker, the hearth glows to a low, steady red. You lie down with the scent of smoke and wood and wool, and you let your mind drift across bins and barrels, mitten and spindle, roof and path, the cat's slow breath, the kettle's last faint hum. Winter holds you, and you hold winter back, gently, with warmth and careful ways. Spring loosens its hold on the hills, and the lane finds its warmer dust, and you feel the year turn in a way your hands recognize. A birthday arrives not with fanfare, but with a loaf shared between neighbors, crust split by careful hands, steam lifting in a soft ribbon. A hymn threads the room, unhurried, and voices follow as easily as breath, a kind tune that makes the walls feel close and kind. A new chair waits by the hearth, made in steady evening hours, joints tight and smooth to the touch, sized for the child who has grown enough to reach the table without leaning. Small celebrations belong to the day you're already living. The kettle hums, the spoon rests where you left it, a pot of sweetened grains sits a little longer so the edges set just right. A sprig of mint finds its way into a cup, and someone adds a line to a simple blessing. Quiet words that ask nothing more than another safe season. A hand rests on a shoulder a moment longer, and that's enough to mark the turning. Harvest draws everyone into the fields with baskets and calm purpose. The air smells of straw and warm earth, a round, honest scent that rises as you cut and lift. Corn stands with sturdy pride. You twist the ear and feel the snap, kernels hard and bright under the husk. Beans come down in dry rattles, pods split, and seeds drum into a bowl with a neat, soft sound. Squash lies heavy and cool in the palms, rinds dull and good, ready for a corner of the cellar and a chalk mark to mind its keeping. Tools clean easily in the low grass, edges wiped and oiled, handles checked for splinters and set smooth with a few sure strokes. You thank the field with plain gestures. Stubble is raked into tidy lines, gleanings gathered for chickens and for the compost heap that will sweeten another spring. A handful of seed is set aside from the best row, wrapped in dry paper and tucked high where mice won't think of it. Sun edges toward the trees, and the long shadows draw across the furrows, marking the end of the work as clearly as any clock could. When light gentles, music finds the doorway. A fiddle wakes from its peg with a first soft test of pitch, then a tune steps out, measured and easy, inviting feet to shift and shoulders to loosen. You don't dance hard, you shuffle and sway, keeping the boards underfoot and the laughter low, the kind of sound that keeps the baby sleeping in the corner. Hands clap softly on the beat. A neighbor hums harmony without trying. The door stays open, and night air comes in with the tune, and someone taps a heel in the threshold to keep time. Letters wait on the table, edges worn from being picked up and set down in patient turns. Words travel by ship and take their own season, but they always arrive like a lantern relit, familiar light with a new flame. You read slowly, letting each simple line unfold at its own pace. Stories from a lane you can still walk with your mind. You answer with care, ink mixed to the right thinness, nib trimmed, dates noted, the form of the words as comforting as their sense. You fold hope into the paper the way a baker folds air into dough, and you seal it with a mark your hand knows well. A candle gutters once in the cross breeze, as if it might go, and a kind hand shields it without hurry. The flame steadies and rises again, a quiet promise kept for the evening's last tasks. Plates are dried and set in their row, a knife edge dressed on the stone with slow, even circles, a latch tested to be sure it won't complain in the night. The room gathers itself to the small circle of light, and the sounds lean toward sleep. The almost silent slide of a chair pushed in, the faint creak of a step as someone crosses to bank the coals. Outside, stars gather above the lane in clear, patient clusters. Crickets take up a steady thread in the grass, and the sea beyond the houses breathes in its long, even way, one long hush following another. The colony's night sounds blend into that larger tide. A dog settling, a shudder easing, a last voice dropping to a murmur, and then to nothing. You stand at the door and let the air cool your face, and you feel the year circle back on itself. Voyage to field, field to table, table to song, song to rest. You close the door with your palm on the wood, a small, grateful pressure, and the day completes its gentle loop. Across the water and into the woods, their days tied together by small, faithful acts, they turned voyages into villages with steady hands and unhurried hearts. If this softened your evening, there's another calm journey waiting just ahead. Subscribe and let the next story carry you to rest. If you're ready to drift, tap into the next quiet chapter now.